Can you talk a little bit about the Marines?
It's like definitely the most miserable times of my life. I'm just like freezing cold in the middle of the woods.
What's a grenade machine gun?
So that's the Mark 19. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's massive.
How many pull-ups can you do?
Right now I'm at 30.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I
Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. I'm here with another episode of Now That You Asked Me. My guest is Mohammed Mahmudo. We met at an Eid festival and I thought he's an interesting person, so I wanted to do a podcast with him. And thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yep. My first question, what were some of the factors that helped you get into Yale, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I was really one of the first people in my high school to even apply to Yale. So I went to a public high school in Georgia. And once I got to Yale, most of the people that were there, they came from New York, these really prestigious private high schools. So just finding out about the process for how I'm supposed to apply for colleges that are harder to get into, that was the first step. So I talked to some of the teachers and I did a ton of research online, and I feel like that's where I got most of my information about college admissions and how to set myself up. I would say the two most important things if you want to apply to any kind of good school, like it doesn't have to be Yale, is to make sure that your academics are very high caliber, because that's going to be the first thing that they look at, and that's what's going to eliminate the most people. So that means every year trying to get as close as possible to all A's, 4.0 GPA, and then the SAT or ACT, depending on which one you take. That's a very important test for determining whether you'll get into the top schools. A lot of people say that it's not just about the numbers, and that's true, but that's usually how they make their first cut. So if you have a GPA that's below a certain threshold, they're not automatically going to disqualify you, but it makes it so much harder than if you're above that threshold. So I would say keep your GPA as close to 4.0 as possible and try to get as high of a test score as possible. Those are the academic things. I think other than that, you really have to have some sort of a unique perspective that you bring to the campus. And a lot of people think that what that means is that, oh, I'm number one in the world in like this like physics Olympiad, or I'm a world champion in chess, and that's not the case. You really could just have a unique perspective that you bring to campus in terms of your background, the way that you were raised, the ideas that you have. So I think that's what discourages a lot of people from applying in the first place. They'll see that, oh, Harvard, all the people that are there are international math champions or science Olympiad champions. Really, if you really care about something and you put a ton of effort into that, that's one way to show that you're passionate, and that shows that you bring a unique perspective. You don't necessarily have to be a world champion in anything. So I would say make sure you got the academics down. If anything else, that's the most important. And then try building that unique perspective. And I think that there's a lot of pressure on people in high school to try to get into good colleges. So sometimes they'll try to join like 10 different clubs.
That's what I did. Yeah. I was like president of like 2-3 clubs.
Yeah.
But at that time, I didn't really know like what my passion was. I discovered it when I was like 20 years old, which is like filmmaking and creating documentaries and films and stuff. But at that point, I feel like it's hard for someone to figure out what their passion is, because it's such an early age, like 15, 16, 17. I feel like for most people, it's like so hard to know what their passion is at that age. You're so young, you're still trying to figure yourself out, you know?
Yeah, that's definitely true. I don't think that, so for my case too, I didn't know what was most important to me when I was in high school too. So Uyghur Activism, that's something that I got more into in college. But I think in high school is when you get the general sense of what you like doing, and what you don't like doing. And from that, just focus on the things that you like doing instead of the stuff that you don't like doing. So when I was in high school, I knew already that I wasn't going to be like a big math guy. Like I wasn't going to be math PhD or anything like that. I think that what a lot of people do is that they're like, oh, I hate math, but it's going to look good for applications if I'm the president of this math club. So I'm going to join this math club and become the president. I think in high school, just like what you're saying, you might not necessarily know exactly what you're passionate about, but you know at that point what you like and what you don't like doing. So I think it's a better idea to focus on the things that you like doing versus just trying to be like the master of everything. Because at that point, you're spreading yourself out too thin, and it doesn't look genuine either. Because nobody
you can't
has
be
that
passionate
time.
about every single thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good point. Like you're not gonna know. When I was 16 years old, I didn't know this is what I want to do with my life, but I had a general idea of like this is what I like, this is what I don't like. So it doesn't have to be like one specific thing, but just be genuine to yourself. That's the biggest thing for me.
Having fun, like doing stuff that you like. A lot of people have told me, especially earlier on in my career, like, why don't you just do computer science, bro? Like, there's no money in film, bro. But like now that I'm making 6 figures, I can say this more confidently. But back then I used to say this too, like, I don't like computer science, so it doesn't matter like how much money there is in computer science. If I get into computer science, I'm probably gonna be miserable. And the way that I looked at it, like, if I like this thing like enough, this art of filmmaking enough that I would do it even without the money, then that means that I can be like better than a lot of people. Because since I like it, I'm gonna be doing it more. I'm gonna be spending more time on it, and that's just gonna make me better and better and better each year, which can open doors for you, which can help you make more money.
Yeah.
But if you have a career that you don't enjoy, you'll only do it when you're working, when you have to. Which then will, you won't have like 12, 13, 14-hour days. You won't have, you won't be like passionate, and then it's not gonna help you advance your career.
Yeah, this might be a controversial idea, but I think it's almost impossible to be great in something if you're not passionate about it. Because like there's that quote, the person that likes walking is going to walk further than the person that's just walking to get to the destination. So if you love if you love what you're doing and you love the grind of just doing it day in, day out, like that's the only way that you're going to have the stamina that you need to truly put in the hours to be successful in that task. Versus if you're just like, oh, computer science or being a doctor. I think that's a really common one. Like a lot of people,
especially among like Muslim immigrant families.
Yeah, like immigrant families. It's like, oh, I'm gonna be a doctor, and doctor. There's very concrete goal. It's like, oh, at the end of this like 10-year road, I'm gonna be making a ton of money, very prestigious position, but that's not gonna be enough of a fire to drive you for 10 years if you truly don't believe in what being a doctor is. Like you don't like helping other people. You don't believe in like wanting to do medicine. I don't think that's enough of a fire to drive most people.
And I feel like it's not enough money, man. Like if I was just thinking about money in terms of the time that you spend, I feel like being a doctor is not that worth it. Like you have to like actually being a doctor. I feel like if it's just about money, I would probably consider like computer science or finance or something like that, or engineering.
Yeah.
Because it's less time and you could actually make the same as a doctor or more even.
And I think so. Coming from Yale, people that graduate, the two main fields that they usually go into are finance and consulting. So I would say out of my year, probably like 50% of people went into finance or consulting. I talked to so many of my friends, and they're making a ton of money right now, but they hate their jobs because they're working like 16 hours every day. I called one of my friends, he was on the East Coast, so it was like midnight for him, and it was his birthday. I was like, happy birthday. And he was like, oh, I'm just getting out of the office right now. It was like midnight on a Friday night. So like, I think that when you're young, that's definitely something that's appealing. Just having a lot of money, because that's a very concrete goal. Because like money you can measure
Yeah.
Like I have 100,000 versus I have 200,000. So that's what makes it appealing for a lot of people. But at least from the people that I talk to, like I'm still young myself, so I don't have all of the wisdom in the world. But the people that I've talked to that they're only in it for money, I see them working their jobs right now and they're making a lot of money, but they're not happy with their jobs. And right now they're all trying to get out of the industries and out of the companies that they're working in right now, and trying to like repivot.
So these
their
are
careers.
like the classic consultant jobs like McKinsey and stuff?
Yeah. I would say that's a little bit better than finance. I think finance is where the burnout is the most real.
Yeah, especially the first 2 years, I think they make you do investment banking, right? And then you get paid like around minimum wage, but you work so hard that it comes to like a 6-figure.
Yeah.
Because you're working so much hours. It's crazy. A lot of people, I think, see it like consultant jobs as like, okay, I'm gonna do this thing when I'm young. I'm gonna like get my money up, and then I'll do my own business, or like, you know, I'll go do something else in my 30s, 40s.
Yeah, that's the thing. My mentality is that you should be more like tolerant of risk when you're younger. So I would rather do the stuff that is more likely to cause me. Like I would do the more adventurous stuff now, because now like if you screw up, it's really not that bad.
Yeah.
Like, you could bounce back. Like I'm 24. Like if I end up with $0 at the end of this year, I'm confident that I could still bounce back at some point. It's the opposite if you're older. So I never really understood that mentality of I'm gonna have a safe job in my 20s and 30s, and then I'm gonna be more adventurous in my 40s.
I feel like a lot of those people just end up being safer and safer as they get older.
Yeah, exactly. So I know it definitely is scary to, especially right out of college, to try to do something that's like outside of the traditional practices, like a different kind of job.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is the time to mess up.
Yeah.
Because later on, you have a family, so if you mess up, like your entire family's gonna get screwed over.
Yeah, I feel that a lot. Like right now, I don't have a family, which means that for business and for my career, I can take a lot of risks. I can move. I can do this, that. It's interesting. When I was like maybe like sophomore or junior year of college, I went up to my immigrant parents and I was like, Mom, Dad, I'm gonna do this YouTube thing. I'm gonna drop out of college.
Yeah.
And then they were like, my dad was like, okay, bro, like you can do it, but just you just have like about a year left in college. Just graduate, and then you can still do it. And my idea going into it was like, even if I fail, I know when I fail, I'll know that I tried. Like I gave it my best shot, and if I fail, I fail. That's on me. But if I let other people tell me that it's not a good idea, it's always gonna be like an itch in my heart. Like I really wanted to do it, and I didn't. Like I didn't try it. You know?
Yeah. Another quote that I like is that there are two types of pains. Like there's the pain of going through something and maybe you're failing, maybe it's difficult, and that's a pain that's manageable. Like it sucks at the moment, but when you're looking back, it's not something that you think too deeply about. And then there's the pain of regret, and that one's 10 times more difficult to bear with, especially when you're looking back at stuff. It's like, oh, I could have done this, but at that point you can't do anything about it. So that was kind of like always my mentality. I'd rather go through the pain of the moment, whether that's like doing a difficult thing or failing, versus just regretting everything in life. So I think that's why I've done more non-traditional stuff versus like the traditional, like go to a good school, get like a finance or like a professional job right after, and then just doing that for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And the way I also look at it is, since like we're young, if I do this YouTube thing for like 2-3 years and then I decide, okay, I don't like it anymore, or like I'm done with this, then it's really just 2-3 years that's gone. Like it's not that big of a deal in terms of like average lifespan is like 70 years.
Yeah.
So like it's not that big of a deal, and a lot of people just spend their 20s like drinking and partying anyways. So but you said that you're in a original like path in terms of like compared to other Ivy graduates, right? So I know that you're in the Marines. Can you talk a little bit about why you decided to join the Marines?
Yeah, so I think the Marine Corps especially. So I think for the military, I wanted to give back because I think my family was very lucky when we came to the United States. So starting off, like my parents were both like very like minimum wage jobs. So my dad worked at a liquor store, my mom was a hotel maid, and then within our lifetime, like me and my brother were able to go to college. They were able to get a lot better jobs in Georgia. And I think that's something that's pretty unique towards the United States. I think that if we stayed in Uzbekistan, it would be a lot harder to get that kind of progression in one life. So I want to give back just because my family has been very lucky in the United States. I think the reason why I joined the Marine Corps specifically is that I think there are two reasons. So first, I really like the culture of challenging yourself. They're very high standards. So with physically and mentally, it's pretty difficult, but that just means that it forces you to, it challenges you a lot, and it helps you grow a lot.
Would you say that it's the hardest in terms of like physical?
So as a branch, it's the hardest physically of all the United States military branches. That was definitely something that was appealing to me. And my first year in the military, it's like the first 7 months, I went through this course called TBS, and that's where you're in a field environment and you do the more traditional Marine Corps stuff. So it's a lot of physical events, a lot of like weapons that you get familiar with. So like M16, M240, like grenade launchers, grenade machine guns. So like a lot of the traditional, just like what you think of when you think of military.
What's a grenade machine gun?
So that's the Mark 19. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like it's massive. I think total it's like 70 pounds. So you split it between a few people when you're hiking with it.
Does it actually shoot hand grenades or?
Yeah, so it pretty much shoots. It's like a different form of the hand grenades, but it's the same thing pretty much. And it shoots it, I mean, just like a machine gun shoots bullets. Yeah, so they use that.
Does it explode on impact?
Yeah.
So it goes like super fast,
yeah.
almost like a bullet.
So I think it's slower than a traditional bullet. Yeah.
You think like a quarterback can throw better?
No, definitely not. Yeah, it's not as precise. But yeah, just like doing that kind of stuff, I think that was a once in a lifetime experience. I'm never gonna shoot a grenade machine launch, grenade machine gun ever again in my life.
I've never considered joining the army, but like a grenade machine gun just like sounds really cool.
Yeah,
you know?
So I think there's a lot of really high highs, a lot of low lows. It's like definitely the most miserable times of my life too. I'm just like freezing cold in the middle of the woods. Then you do really cool stuff as well. So I think that I enjoyed a ton. And then for the Marine Corps too, I think there are a lot of opportunities for travel. So you get to go to all these different countries. And I think that's a way that I grew a lot too. Just interacting with people from different cultures and seeing what other countries are like, what they value, how they look at Americans, like what they think of us, all that kind of stuff.
Which countries have you been to?
So just this year, I've been to, on behalf of the military, I've been to the Philippines, South Korea. I've worked with the Singapore military. And then just being stationed in Hawaii, I also get to do a lot of... Yeah, like Hawaii is awesome. I've been to all the other islands, Kauai, Big Island, Maui. And then it's really easy to like just vacation to like personal vacation to other countries.
Yeah.
So I've been to Australia. So yeah, a lot of great opportunities just to get out and do stuff with other countries. Also get to like immerse yourself with their cultures.
Which island was your favorite?
Definitely Kauai.
Same. Yeah.
Kauai was the most beautiful place that I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that anywhere can top it. Just like beautiful nature.
Yeah. I have you did any of those like helicopter or plane tours?
Of Kauai?
Of Kauai, yeah.
No.
Next time, if you get a chance, also for the viewers, there's like a $150 plane ride, 1 hour plane ride around Kauai.
Okay.
and it was such a cool experience.
Yeah.
Because you get to see all the mountains and all the waterfalls, and like it gets pretty close. I bet the helicopters get closer, but it costs more.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out.
That was
sounds
one
awesome.
of the coolest, and yeah, as you said, like the nature is just amazing, like the Nepali coast and all that.
Yeah, I did the boat ride of the Nepali coast, so I would definitely recommend that for anyone that wants to go to Kauai. That was awesome.
Also, they have the best poke I've ever eaten.
Okay, yeah, I didn't try the poke out there.
Yeah, there was this place called Hanalei Poke,
Okay.
and bro, it was just like the most amazing poke ever. Like apparently the owner catches himself and just brings the fish, so it's like
Oh, really?
he just catches and they make it. Like
Yeah.
they make it when you ask them, that's when they make it.
Okay.
So it's not like
Yeah,
pre-prepared.
it's pretty sick.
It's like super fresh.
Yeah.
And like fresh caught as well.
Yeah. My
So-
favorite poke is still the Foodland poke. I'll definitely try it out.
Have you
once I'm
tried
in
Off the Hook?
Kauai. No. No, is that
Off
a
the
restaurant?
Hook is in Manoa. It's like a
Okay.
takeout place. You can't. There's no place to sit.
Yeah.
There's always like 10 people in line trying to get poke. And it's like a regular plate is like $16,
Yeah.
but it's so good.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah, me and my friends go there on Fridays after Juma. I think it's probably the best I've eaten on Oahu.
Yeah.
On Oahu, it's
Yeah,
really
it's
good.
sick.
Yeah. So, what was the hardest aspect of your training in the Marines?
So I think that really depends on the person. I think for me, the physical stuff wasn't too difficult because beforehand I trained a lot physically.
What was like the hardest physical?
Hardest physical thing, I think just like the endurance of being out in the field a lot. So I'm kind of like on the skinnier side. So when we were in Quantico, it's in Virginia, especially in the winters, it got super cold. And if you're skinnier, the cold is worse for you because you have less fat to insulate you. So when it was like cold at night, the worst is like if it snows, it's cold. But when it's raining right above freezing temperature, that is the worst because then it's not even snow, but you're super wet. And being wet makes you feel so much colder. So I remember there's some nights that I couldn't sleep at all just because I was so cold.
Like you were cold in the day, so you couldn't sleep at night?
No, so like we would have like our sleeping bags, be trying to go to sleep, but I would just
you
be
don't
so
sleep
cold.
in a bed, like you sleep
No. So when you're in the field, like you're in the forest, so you're just sleeping like in a sleeping bag.
so as if you were in a war or something.
Yeah. So that's the training that we did in our first year. So I think that was the hardest for me. It depends on the person though. Like some people aren't as good at running, so like running, and then you hike a lot with really heavy packs. So for people that are shorter or people that are a lot skinnier, that can be difficult too. Sometimes it's like 100 pounds on your back. You're hiking with it.
If you're yourself like 120 pounds, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so much.
Yeah, that makes it difficult. But I think other than that, yeah, it's really just more of a mental thing than a physical thing. I think that there are a lot of people that like are physically fit enough, but it's really like the mental side that usually gets people.
Do they try to like play games mentally, like try to get you out, like?
So during your first school, that's called OCS. That's where they test people to see if they're like physically and mentally ready to be a Marine Corps officer. So that school, they do try to like play those games, all that kind of stuff. If you ever see like Marine Corps drill instructor videos, that's where they're like yelling at you the entire time. So that was definitely a fun time. But yeah, really after that point, it's a lot more professional.
Did they do anything mental that got to you, like that, you know?
It's just like screaming all the time, and yeah, you kind of get used to it after a while. I think like the first week it was just like brand new environment, coming from college, going into like a military environment. It was kind of a culture shock. Then after a while, you get used to it. You realize it's just someone yelling at you. Like it doesn't really mean anything. It's kind of like a game. Like you just have to play the game to graduate from the school.
Yeah. Is there like a competition in the training where like you get like first place, second place? Do they rank you after you train?
So the school that I went to, TBS, they rank everyone. So of the 300 lieutenants, they rank you based off your academics, physical fitness, and leadership. Yeah, so they rank everyone from 1 out of 300 to 300 out of 300.
What did you get?
I was number 4 or 5. Yeah, so I think that as long as you're like good at academics and then like physically fit, those are like the big ones, and then everything else you kind of figure out. So when I first started out, there was so much that I didn't know. I was super ignorant on a lot of topics, but as long as you're willing to learn, military, it does kind of like seem like a foreign culture at the start, but then like as long as you're open-minded and willing to learn, it's pretty easy to learn.
Did they make you guys do that video? I saw that video where they're like in the sea and they're like.
Oh no, I think that's Navy SEALs.
That's Navy SEALs?
Yeah.
How do you become a Navy SEAL? Do they like pick from the Marines?
No, so that's only the Navy. So you have to apply specifically to go to BUDS in the Navy. Yeah, Navy SEAL, it's very high attrition rate. I think out of people that say like they raise their right hand and say they want to be a Navy SEAL, I think like 1 out of like 500 or something actually makes it in the end. But
wow.
Yeah, Navy SEAL.
What's it like in the Marines, the attrition rate?
So it depends on what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So for the officer side, I think it's like 50% for getting through OCS. But Navy SEAL is like, that's special operations. So they have like much higher.
Can you just apply to be a Navy SEAL, or do you have to be in the Navy for some time and then apply?
I think that you can join the Navy on a Navy SEAL contract. Mm-hmm. So you go through regular boot camp, and then after boot camp, you go to Navy SEAL training. And then if you fail, you get reclassed to another job.
Mm-hmm. I see. Did you know your major going into Yale, or did you?
No. So I was pretty open-minded. I knew, just like what we were saying before, like I knew what I liked and I didn't like. So I knew I wasn't going to be a physics major or anything like that. But I didn't know what specifically I wanted to study until my sophomore year.
Mm-hmm. And what did you decide to study?
I did global affairs. So that's kind of like international relations.
Mm-hmm. Cool. What were some of the like cool experiences or rewarding things that happened for you through being a student at an Ivy League college?
Yeah, so I think that one of the big benefits is that you have a ton of really cool people that come and speak to your class, and that's not necessarily something that you would get at all schools. So I remember my freshman year, I think it was like the first week or like first month, we had John Kerry and Leo DiCaprio from Titanic come and speak to our class. So that was really cool. And you would always just have random like notable figures come and they would speak to you, and it would be good to hear their perspectives. We had a lot of political leaders, I think like Hillary Clinton.
When they speak, is it like in a conference room, or is it like in a more casual setting, like more accessible?
Yeah, so it's both. So they'll do big lectures to entire groups, and then they'll usually do smaller group discussions as well. So I think that overall was really cool. I think that another thing that was really unique was that it was a very, very diverse student body, and not just diverse in terms of this is how many Caucasians, this is how many Asian students. There are a ton of people that are international, and I don't think you necessarily get that at every school. But there are students from Japan that live there their entire lives. There are students from South America, the Middle East, and I think that's one of the biggest ways that I grew, just being able to interact with people from very different cultures, very different governments, and to learn more about the world that way.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about your fitness journey. Because I know you and I both work out, and how did you decide, like what made you start working out, and how was that progress?
Yeah, so I think I just started casually working out in high school, but I just did like what every other high schooler did. I was kind of stupid with it, so I would just do the gym bro splits where I would like hit arms and chest every day.
The high school goblins in the gym?
Yeah, exactly. So that was me at the start. And it was really just like one of my friends from high school, his name is Colin, and he was really into the gym, and he kind of put me onto it. So I started working out in high school, but I wasn't really following a good plan or anything. And before that, I was totally unathletic. So I wasn't really big into sports growing up. I did some soccer and some cross country, a little bit of that when I was like really, really young. But then in college, I became a lot more serious because of the Marine Corps. So I was like, I have to at least be good at pull-ups, which is part of the physical fitness test. I have to be at least good at cardio for the 3-mile run, and I have to be relatively strong. So I just started like a more
Pull-ups
regimented.
and cardio are so like annoying, bro.
Yeah,
Like it's the stuff that like my favorite is the bench. Probably like every other guy at the gym.
yeah.
But how many pull-ups can you do?
Right now I'm at 30.
Wow.
When I started out, it was only like 10 pull-ups because for the Marine Corps, to max out, you need to do 23. So first time that I got on the pull-up bar and started doing pull-ups, I did 10. So I was like way below the maximum points for it.
First time I started working out, the way that it started, I couldn't not pull up. I'm not talking about. I couldn't do a push-up.
Yeah.
Like I was like so weak and like obese, I couldn't do one push-up, and it was so embarrassing.
Yeah.
I was like, bro, like things gotta change around here. And then I started doing it, and when I first started, my goal was to get to 10 pull-ups. Like I had some goals, right? So one of them was at the time I thought benching 135 was crazy.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was the same for me.
And then I thought 10 pull-ups, bro, like that's crazy.
Yeah.
And then 95-pound military press, I thought that was crazy as well.
Yeah.
But now I look back and I can hit all of those things, and I'm like, wow, like that's such good progress. But it takes so much like discipline and hard work.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people are like, I'd like to work out, and they don't, because it's not something that you can do if you just kind of want to do it. Like the way that it works, like right now in my mind, is like I have to work out once a week at least.
Yeah.
And if you change that like mentality, that mindset from like I want to, or like I'm trying, to like I gotta do this, like I have to do this no matter what, I'm doing this once a week.
Yeah.
It changes the results as well, I think.
Yeah. I think one of the ways that I started making a lot more progress was that I would start writing everything down. So when you write things down, you keep yourself 10 times more accountable, because if I'm writing down in my journal whenever I worked out and what I hit for bench press, for my 3-mile run, for pull-ups, if I see that in my journal I only worked out one time in the last 2 weeks, then like you can't lie to yourself that way. Like you'll look in the journal and it's like, oh, I only worked out one time. Like we like to tell ourselves lies in our mind to make it seem like we're doing more than what we actually are. And that just keeps you accountable. And same thing with progression. If I see that I've been like running the same amount for 3 months straight, then the journal is going to tell me that. It's going to say that like you ran 20 miles 3 months ago and running 20 miles now. So if you want to make progression, like it's very good for helping with that.
I think that's one of the things that corporate America gets right. They have this saying like what gets measured gets achieved. Like what gets tracked gets the results. And I had that experience too. I was like a dorm manager at a student dormitory, and I used to always like track the students like cleanliness, how clean their rooms are. I try to get them to be more clean, and it just like I would warn them, I would talk to them, it just wouldn't work, right?
Yeah.
And then we did this istishara like discussion, and then we were like, okay, like we're gonna track it, and we're gonna attach a positive reward at the end of it. It's like going out to dinner for free.
Yeah.
And then what surprised me is that I was still doing the same mental tracking, but the fact that I was writing it down every day and I showed them, like, look, like this room did this and this today, this room didn't do this, like I would write it down, and that changed their whole attitude. And before, what I tried to do was negative reinforcement. So I would try to like say like if you guys like room is not clean, you will get this consequence, whatever, and it wouldn't work. And once I changed the way that I think about it, then the results changed, because first of all, like in education, negative reinforcement doesn't work long term. It doesn't work because when you do negative reinforcement, I've seen that it works for maybe like a week. Just that week, they're like, okay, like I just gotta be a little bit more careful.
Yeah.
And then once it passes, once that short term passes, and they forget about the pain, then it doesn't do anything.
They teach the exact same thing in the military too. Like if you just focus on negative reinforcement, then people are gonna do what you say that they have to do, but nothing more. So it doesn't drive any initiative on their part. Or like, oh, I'm just gonna clean my room. I think military it's more strict, so you probably could hold them to it if you just use negative reinforcement. But that's all that they're gonna do. It's like the bare minimum. But if you want people to actually do what you tell them to do and to do it at a very high level, you have to be able to convince them that it's in their best interest to work hard at this project. So I think a lot of that comes with explaining why. There's a lot of people, they just tell you to do something and it's like, oh, do this, and they don't explain why. So people, they don't really understand like if it's important or why it's important for them to do the activity.
Even then, I feel like sometimes it's not enough because people will understand why it's good for them if there's not enough incentive, and it still might not be enough because it's like a personal discipline thing at that point. Because there's a lot of things that people know they could do to make things better, but they don't. So I feel like putting incentives, tracking, measuring, and also explaining why it's in their interest, and positive reinforcement, like you combine everything and then you get a pretty good chance.
Yeah, I think it depends on the person too. Like a lot of people, they try to use the same leadership techniques on everyone that they work with. And I think that part of it, you got to understand who you're working with. Like people are motivated by very different things. So person X, they might be more motivated about a sense of community and sense of team. So like you could play that when you're dealing with that person. Then person Y, maybe they're more motivated about just like money, like tangible things. So I think it really depends on like knowing the people that you're working with and being able to tailor different solutions based on the specific person.
Yeah, I heard this about Sir Alex Ferguson. You might know him. He's the legendary Manchester United manager. Before he got on, Manchester United had maybe like 7 or something Premier League like the league trophy. After he got on, he got 13 in his managerial career. So at that point, they were way behind Liverpool, their rivals. They were way behind everyone else. And when he left, they were by far the best team in England in terms of trophies and numbers. And what they say about him is that they say that he knew what buttons to push for every one of his players. So like if he knows that, let's say it matters to you what your dad thinks about you, he would motivate you like, what would your dad think about think if you did this, if you didn't do this. And then if he knows that something else motivates another player, he pushes that exact button, which is super hard because then he has to do the work of knowing and trying to get to know all of those people's different buttons, which is like super hard. But that's one of the things that comes, I think, with high level soccer coaching, is because these people are so like high income, like unusual people that it's so hard to manage them. It's one thing to be a good tactician, which there is a lot of good tacticians, but if you're not a good manager, if you can't manage their emotions, if you can't help them manage their fame and all that, then you still might not be a great manager.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing with leadership. So a lot of people, they think that when they're a leader, they just have to talk all the time. They have to like order people around, tell them what to do. I think as big of a component is listening to other people. Like you're not going to know what people's strengths and weaknesses are and what motivates them unless you listen to them. So I think that just as much time that you spend like telling them what to do, you should spend listening to them so that you understand what their needs are as an individual, what motivates them, all those kinds of things.
In the dormitory, we would do like a istishara discussion for the week. Every week we would do it, and we would maybe spend, as like the managers, we would spend like 10-15 minutes just doing like announcements, and then the rest of the time would be I would ask every single person one by one, like, is there something that you want to talk about? Is there something that, and one by one I would ask everyone, and most of the time would be spent discussing and trying to understand and trying to solve together what they're coming up with, like what the issues are that they're coming up with, which is really interesting. So right now, what are your fitness goals? Do you have those right now?
Yeah, so before it was very concrete. It was, so my mentality about fitness is that it's to serve, like my body is to serve me. So I don't want to prioritize fitness over other stuff that I'm doing in life. So like right now I'm studying for the LSAT. Like I don't want to be in the gym for 2 hours every day when I could be studying for the LSAT. So right now I'm really just in a maintenance phase. Like before I was trying to get stronger. There are times where I focus more on cardio, trying to get better at cardio. But right now I'm just trying to maintain where I'm at. But I still think it's important to work out all the time because like I wouldn't have the energy otherwise, because I'm pretty much either working or studying 16 hours every day. And I honestly like don't feel super tired from that. I think a lot of that stamina comes from the fact that I'm in pretty good shape. Like I like doing a lot of outdoorsy things. I like to like keep moving, like doing cardio, swimming, running, all that kind of stuff. So I keep on doing that, but it's not like I'm in the gym for like 2.5 hours every single day. At that point, I'm both like spending a ton of time and then probably taking away a lot of my energy. After a certain point, I'm just gonna be like zapping my energy. After a workout like that, I'll just not be able to focus when I'm studying.
Yeah, I'm also in the maintenance phase. The way that I think it worked was when I first started, I had those newbie gains, and then it's so enjoyable to get those newbie gains, and like because your body changes so quickly in the beginning. But then now, like I like focus on just increasing my bench, let's say, for 6 months, and then it goes up by like 10 pounds.
Yeah,
it gets less, it gets less fun because you put in more and then you get less on the other side.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, I think you gotta love the journey, because even 10 pounds in half a year, like just think about that over the span of 5 years. So 20 pounds a year over five, that's 100 pounds. So just think like 5 years from now, benching 100 more pounds than you bench right now. Like that's kind of crazy. So that's what
I feel like one of my life goals was to hit 225.
Yeah. And now it's 315.
No, it's not. I mean,
you gotta keep pushing it.
Once I hit it, I was like, okay, there's nothing else in like lifting that's gonna satisfy me more. That's like a bigger
I'll tell you,
goal.
315 will.
It will?
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Like when I was in high school, I was like, there's no way. I'm so far from benching 225. And then at some point I hit it, and then I was like, oh, I'm never going to hit 315. And then I hit it. So like,
I always thought like 225 was like kind of possible. Okay. But I never considered 315.
Yeah. I mean, you're still young. So like, yeah, there's so much more potential. It's like people usually peak in their early 30s. Like if you look at all the like marathoners, all of the strongmen, like powerlifters, all that kind of stuff, Olympic athletes, they usually peak in their 30s. So yeah, it's really just like a lifelong thing, but you don't always have to prioritize fitness. I do try to be active almost every day, try to do something just so that I stay in shape and I stay in the mentality of staying in shape. But if there are more important things in life going on, then I don't think that you should be going crazy with the fitness in terms of like the 2-hour workouts every day.
Yeah. Your family got invited to the White House. So how did that happen? Like, what was that experience for them like?
Yeah, so my brother does a lot of political work. So he graduated with a political science degree. And then before he started law school, he did a ton of political work. And part of that was working in the White House with the COVID vaccine distribution, both internal to the United States at first and then internationally.
So you guys got early vaccines?
No, I mean, I think they got it pretty late actually. I got it early because I'm in the military.
Yeah.
So military, we're like the first ones to get some of the vaccines.
When did you get it?
I mean, I got it 2020. I mean, it wasn't like super early, but
I got it like March.
Oh, okay, yeah, so I think
pretty
much the same time.
I got it because I think they were prioritizing people in the education sector.
Yeah.
So I applied in New Jersey because I was at the time volunteering at a dormitory. So I was like, it was actually important for me because we had all these students coming from different states.
Yeah.
And I'm like managing this dormitory because if something happened to me in terms of COVID, it would be a big problem for the school, you know?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, so he worked in distribution. Towards the end, it was like distributing it to a lot of poorer countries. But he worked at the White House, I want to say for like a year and a half. And it was super intense work. So he was probably working like 80, 90 hours a week, every week.
Like work.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know what happens? I think, similar to what you said before, people are more capable than they think they are. Before, just going to college, like just going to class, I thought that was like, if you go to every single class, that's like you have to be really disciplined. That's hard. But then I like while going to college, I started working, right? And then I was like, okay, like this is hard. Like you're working full time, 40 hours, and you're going to class. That's hard. And then I started doing another job. So I was like working like 70, 80 hours and doing 6 classes at college. And then I was like, yo, like this is super hard.
Yeah.
But then you get like every step you take, you get used to it. So right now, when I work like 80 to 100 hour weeks, it doesn't feel that hard to me. Like after this podcast, you already know like I'm going to a film shoot and that's like 12 hours. And then tomorrow morning I got school and then work. Like, but what happens is, especially if you like what you're doing,
I think that's the key.
You will get used to it, and I do not feel burnt out because I like what I'm doing, and I think it's also important to take active breaks. So another thing that I realized was that when I take a break and I just like do nothing, it actually doesn't help me that much.
Yeah.
But then I started planning my breaks in a way where I was like, if I feel like I worked really hard for a certain period, I would be like, okay, like this weekend I'm not gonna work and I'm gonna just play this video game the whole time. Or like I'm just gonna go to this remote island and just like explore. And I think planning your breaks in a way that you're doing something different that's also helping you like relax.
Yeah.
I think it helps because in my personal life, for example, I don't enjoy taking a break and just doing nothing. It doesn't help me that much.
No, that makes sense. And I think the point about if you like what you're doing, the effort that it takes to work in that field becomes so much less. Like that is the most important thing. Because like when I was in high school, like if anyone watching is in high school, like high school, I was probably in school for like 6 to 7 hours a day. I was like, oh, this sucks. Like this is, I don't know how I'm
Wait
gonna
till
work.
you get to the real world, guys. Wait till you get to the real world.
No, that's the thing. I think right now I'm probably working and studying like 14 to 16 hours a day, which like compared to, in terms of hours compared to high school, it sounds like a lot more. I feel less burnt out and less like burdened than I was in high school. Because in high school, it's like, I liked my teachers, but some of the subjects, like they're kind of boring. It wasn't necessarily what I loved doing. So even those 6 hours, they felt super long. It felt like a chore to get through. But if you really like what you're doing, like I'm doing Uyghur advocacy, doing Marine Corps stuff, which I love. I'm studying in ways that I found that makes it fun and exciting. So like I'm really not feeling like I'm working for 16 hours a day. Like it feels like I'm just doing cool experiences, and like, I don't feel burnt out or anything.
What are some of your study strategies? Do you have any?
So one thing that I do is that I try to make it as comfortable as possible for me when I'm studying, because studying by itself, it's kind of a difficult thing. So to make myself want to do it, I do it in environments that I like, and I try not to deprive myself of other things that are enjoyable, because that just makes it even harder. So I really like just like being outdoors and people watching, like being in settings where there are a lot of people. So I try not to study in my room, just like by myself. What I'll do is I'll go to the cafe. I'll usually go to the Al Moana Center. I love that mall. It's like all outdoors. It's like the biggest outdoor mall in the world.
I think something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So it's like super nice. You'd see the sun. Like I really like being outside and like seeing the sun. And I'll just put on the noise canceling the headphones and I'll just study there. I feel like that's a lot easier than studying by myself. Like I'll kind of treat myself to like drinking coffee when I want, or like grabbing a meal while I'm there too. So I try to make the environment as comfortable as possible. And then I kind of do the same thing as you. For study breaks, I'll just change the topic. So I'll work on studying for a couple hours, and then I'll do some work on Uyghur advocacy as a study break, because it's like a change in pace. And I think that's the big thing. Like I'm focusing on one thing for a while. After that, I get bored of that. So then I work on Uyghur advocacy, and that's just like a different topic. It's something that's fresh. So I can work on that for like an hour. And then I go back to LSAT studying, and it feels like I took a break. But even though like I'm still kind of doing other kinds of work, if that makes sense.
Yeah. How do you think your parents felt when they went to the White House?
They were super excited.
Yeah.
Yeah. They thought it was awesome. Yeah, just like what I was saying before, like our family is very lucky, because when we came to America, we were on food stamps. My parents didn't know any English. My dad, he worked at a liquor store. My mom was a hotel maid. And then just like, think how long it was. It's like 24 years later, like they're in the White House with the President of the United States. So that really shows you that in this country, it's different from some other countries where it's not possible to make a big jump within one lifetime. I feel like in this country, like there are a lot more opportunities than there are in some other countries.
I think there are problems as well. Like if you try to find stuff to complain about, you can always find stuff. But I would say to people that are complaining, like of course there's issues that are like messed up, but in comparison to other countries, I think we have it pretty good here. Like, it's important to think critically and like criticize people in charge to hold them accountable. But it's also, I think what a lot of people forget, it's also important to be grateful. Like, I think we're lacking that in a major way, and I do think the United States is the greatest nation. Like, in terms of like the country, I mean, I do think it's the greatest country. If you look at geography, if you look at economy, if you look at, I think in many ways, I do think it's the greatest.
Yeah, we should definitely like critique the things that are wrong, because I don't think that we should be like, oh, everything is great. Like this is the best place. Like let's not worry about the problems. Like we should still focus on the problems, try to make things better. Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, like you should from time to time take a step back. And I think going to other countries a lot as part of the Marine Corps, like that gave me that perspective, because over there, like people, the things that they complain about are very different from the things that most Americans complain about. Like here, they complain about like things that they're important, but it's not life and death. But over there, it's like,
for example, in another country, police violence is not in the news, and here, like when it happens, you know, it matters. Like it could still happen, but like it's not even. It's just a number. In a lot of countries, it's just a number.
Yeah. So like and just very life and death things like natural disasters. Like here, Maui was very big. Like that was surprising to me. I think that the Maui fires, like that was completely devastating. I think that was one of the worst natural disasters in terms of like deaths in a very long time. So that one was a bad one. But generally, we don't have like natural disasters that kill tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people because our infrastructure and emergency response is generally solid enough. But you'll hear from other countries like, oh, there's an earthquake there, like 100,000 people died.
Yeah, during the earthquake, some of my relatives passed away. My
Oh,
cousins.
really?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
three
sorry
of my
about that.
cousins and my uncle passed away. And I was talking to this architect friend of mine, Merit Sakata, by the way. He was in episode 1 of the podcast. He's the old Japanese friend of mine. And he's an architect, right? And he's like, he said that he looked at all these pictures of like fallen buildings in Turkey. And he said that there was like no like structure, like support bars.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, he was surprised that those buildings were like just staying as they were before the earthquake.
Yeah.
'Cause-
Yeah, my parents tell me the same thing in Uzbekistan. Like there's so many buildings that just randomly fall down because they don't have like the building codes that we have in the United States. Like there aren't the standards that you have to have for a building. Like you just build a building if you want.
It's one thing to have it on paper, like in Turkey they have it on paper, but it's another thing to actually have people in the government that are trustworthy and don't take bribes and actually apply those rules to everyone. I feel like America is really good in that sense, where like compared to other countries, it's super rare to bribe someone. Especially low level people.
Yeah.
In other countries, everyone's bribable almost. Like in a lot of countries, there's still bribes in America, but the levels are like, it's just on another level in other countries.
Yeah. Yeah. There are definitely some corrupt people in America, like the American government, but there are other countries where
It's like
that's the
everyone
entire
corrupt.
form
It's
of government.
unusual to be not corrupt.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy. So you have an Uyghur background? Which side of your family?
On my mom's side,
Your mom's side. So how did you learn about the Uyghur plight and like how did you get involved? What affected you?
it really happened gradually throughout my life. I first heard about the stories from my mom, but it wasn't really something that I saw in the news. So it was something that she told me, but I didn't have a ton of stuff that you look to that backs it up. And she would just tell me stories about my grandparents, like how they were put in prisons because they're Muslim in China, and then how they were kicked out of East Turkestan and eventually moved over to Kazakhstan and then Uzbekistan. And then I think later in my life, when I was in my like early teenage years, that's when I started seeing stuff on Facebook, the Uyghur, just like Muslim activists talking about what's happening to Uyghur people in China, and seeing that Chinese people were like beating them, arresting them. But I think that was still before there was a lot of talk about the camps that Uyghur people were being put in. And I think that when I was living in Georgia, there wasn't a huge Uyghur or Muslim community there. So I was less involved there. Also, like I wasn't big on the internet, so like I didn't know how to organize or anything like that. And then I think college is where I got really like a lot more educated on the issue, and that's where I realized that like this is something that is happening at such a high level. Like there's so many Uyghurs that are being imprisoned, being persecuted, like all really the severity of the human rights abuses. And that's also where people start talking about it at the national level, because before it was kind of like it was a lot less optimistic that we could actually do something about it, because China's the second most powerful country in the world, and you'll look at other Muslim countries, like a lot of countries in the Middle East, a lot of countries in Central Asia where 99% of the population is Muslim, and you look at what these countries say to China, it's like in the United Nations meetings, they're having resolutions saying, is China committing human rights abuses against Uyghurs? And all these Muslim countries say no, because they have the economic ties with China, so they can't speak out against them.
Yeah, I think one problem that we have in a lot of Muslim countries is that we have corrupt leaders in our government. So the people that are at the top of the government, they don't care like what happens in Uyghur. They just want to keep their jobs. They just want to like keep the status quo.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of those people don't care what their citizens want, what's good for the world, what's good for Uyghurs. Like I feel like they're just there because they like having power, which sucks.
I think that's what made me pretty pessimistic at the start, because I was like, oh, these leaders of Arab and Muslim countries, they're not doing anything about it, and they're like the president or the prime minister or the king of this country. So how am I, just like a random college student, going to be able to do anything about it? But I think that two things happened during that time. I think that first, we were able to get a better look into what's actually happening inside of the camps. So there are a lot of investigative journalists that are able to actually visit the camps, a lot of people that wrote about their experiences in the camps. So now Americans can actually see this is what's happening to Uyghur people. They can see like this is super messed up.
That's important to, I think, share your story, because if you don't share the suffering that you go through, then it's super hard for people outside to understand you and help you. But trust me, there are people that will want to help you if you share your story. And another thing about what you said, like being pessimistic, there's two things that I think about when I'm pessimistic. One is, you know about the prophet Abraham, how he gets thrown into the fire. So in that story, there's this mini story of this ant, right? And this ant is carrying water to the big fire. And like, it's like, what are you doing? And the ant is carrying water. But then you ask the ant, like, what's the purpose? Like, it's not gonna matter. Like, there's this huge fire and you're just an ant. Like, the water you carry is gonna do nothing. And the fire is like a mountain of fire. And the ant is like, I just want to make sure people know whose team I'm on.
Yeah. Yeah, like, no, that's a beautiful story. Yeah, I love that. That's awesome.
And another thing that I think about is like, when I'm trying to decide if I want to do something or not do something, I try to think of it like this. I can't control other people, but I can control myself. What if every single person did this or didn't do this?
Yeah,
like,
that's a
what
good
would
point.
the world look like if everyone did this? And if I want to live in that world, I do it.
Yeah.
If I don't want to live in that world, I don't do it. Of course, I mess up sometimes, but that's kind of the way I try to think, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I've become, I think at that point, so that was when I was in high school, early college, I was pessimistic. Now I'm very optimistic about our future, because I think that there are a lot of people talking about the issue now. And every time that you say Uyghur, like that is something that helps bring really a spotlight on the issue. So I just wanted as many American people, as many people in the world to hear the word Uyghur so that they know what's going on. And just like what you said, like when people find out about what's happening, like most people are good, like most people have hearts. So when they find out what's happening, obviously they're on the side of Uyghur people, just they don't know what's happening. And I think that if enough people know what's happening, like you're able to make changes in China, because China, at the end of the day, they do want to have a good image. They do want to have good relations with other countries. So if all these other countries are saying, oh, China, you're terrible, you shouldn't be doing stuff like this, then that can change their behavior. So I think Free Uyghur Now, really the three mechanisms for making change for Uyghur people, I think that one big one is to make China pay economically for their decisions.
Reparations.
So a big part of it is that a lot of businesses, they use Uyghur labor. They use labor from that region and from Xinjiang. And it's a lot of these very significant companies. So Nike, Apple, Zara, they use a lot of cotton in that area. They use a lot of processors, and they use Uyghur forced labor for that. So we might not be able to get pressure on China for being able to stop them from using forced labor. But if we speak to these companies, and a lot of these companies, 21st century, they're saying that they want to be more compassionate and they want to listen to social justice and human rights. So if you put pressure on them and say that you're using slave labor to make your shirts, or you're using slave labor to make your iPhones, then that's something that makes it more difficult for them to do business, and they might stop doing business with China.
Yeah. At the end of the day, for them, I feel like it's bottom line, because these are public companies that have like shareholders, and the way they probably think, I'm guessing, is that, okay, like, how much is this image gonna hurt my business of not caring about human rights, and then how much money am I making from this forced labor?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like,
So I
they're
think
trying to balance that. I
yeah.
feel like they don't care.
Yeah, but I think that there have been cases in the past where if something is made into a big enough issue, then it is going to impact their bottom line.
Did Apple move their processes?
So that's the second point. I think the second point is political. So you have to get political leadership, and we're very lucky in that this is a bipartisan issue. So almost every Democrat and every Republican supports Uyghur advocacy. Like, they support the Uyghur people. So they're pushing bills now. This is something that started very recently, I think like 3 years ago, that is discouraging the use of forced labor and banning any products that come where they can prove that forced labor was used. So right now we got like the very basic bills that are being passed, but hopefully we can get like more strict measures that constrain like more of the forced labor that's being used.
Yeah. How much of it do you think is like these politicians just being anti-China and you just want to hurt China's image?
I think that's a big part of it.
How much is it like they actually care?
I think that's a big part of it. Like, I think that a lot of the politicians just want to show that they're anti-China, that they're anti like the CCP. But I think that that's definitely something that we could use to our advantage, because at the end of the day, they're still gonna try to constrain China's ability to like use Uyghurs as forced labor. So I think even if their motives aren't necessarily in the right place, we can still engage with them as allies.
Yeah. So I heard this quote saying, "Use what you got." As someone, if you want to get things done, like, if you're sad, that can motivate you to go to the gym. If you're happy, that can, like, whatever you're feeling or whatever is going on, you just gotta use what you got, because we don't have a lot of time. You know?
Yeah,
like,
I'm not gonna ask for like a perfect solution right now, because 10 years ago no one was talking about Uyghurs. So 10 years ago we had nothing. Now we have people that care about it. So
didn't it kind of start like 10 years ago, like 2013, when that new president jumped in? Like, didn't he kind of like ramp up the human rights abuses?
So it's really a historic issue. Like, even my own grandparents in the 50s, they got kicked out of that region because they're Muslim. I think that it's become a lot more intense within the last, let's say, 15 years. That's when they started the detainment camps, and they started being more forceful, because it's that, and they've had a lot of advances with technology, which makes it very dystopian. It's like really freaky, where they're able to monitor Uyghurs, and if you're sending text messages that reference the Quran or that show that you're Muslim, or they have facial recognition, and they can use their cameras that are throughout the city to see if you enter people's houses during times of prayer, and then afterwards they arrest you and they're like, oh, you're going to this person's house to pray. We have this evidence that every day at this time you go into their house. Then that's a very dystopian part. They're using facial recognition, they're tapping into everyone's phones, and they're using that to arrest people. But I think it's gotten a lot worse within the last 15 years, because before it was just like very general. Uyghurs were seen as a lower class of people, but now it's systemic. Like, they're putting them in camps, they're using very advanced technology, higher level than what we see pretty much anywhere else in the world, to arrest these Uyghurs. So because now like their goal is to eliminate Uyghur culture and our history. So to do that, it's really just a genocide, and a lot of American political leaders, the United Nations has called it genocide. Secretary of State Michael Pompeo called it a genocide
Yeah.
because they're getting rid of the culture, then they're also trying to prevent the births of future Uyghurs.
Yeah, that's really sad. And for people who don't know, a lot of my audience is asylees and refugees, but that's what your grandparents went through is one of the hardest things ever, because especially back then there's like no internet, like no technology. Where you grow up, that's all you know, right? And then like one day you just leave everything behind,
Yeah.
and like try to start a new life.
Yeah, no, it's very difficult.
Super hard, and I think if someone doesn't go through that, I don't think they will fully understand how hard that experience is. A lot of immigrants know this, but being a refugee is like way harder than just being a regular immigrant. I'm an asylee myself. I have my interview coming up next week.
Okay.
So inshallah, I get accepted, and then I'm excited about the possibility of becoming an American citizen.
Yeah.
Because I always
That's
feel
exciting.
like I'm a citizen because I've been living here for like most of my life, but I'm not.
Yeah.
Like
It's such a slow process.
just
Like
feels-
bureaucracy.
it just feels weird to me because
Yeah.
this is all I know, right? Like if I went to Turkey right now, if I went back, other than like all the political problems and me getting arrested, possibility of me getting arrested, I just don't think I would like, people would see me as a foreigner. Like
Yeah.
people would see me as like, oh, that American guy. And here it's, especially Hawaii, it's more diverse. You know, people are more accepting of different kinds of people, which I like. I felt like there's like, I've been to like some states like Dakota, Wyoming, it's like way less diverse, and it's like
Yeah, it depends on where you're at.
yeah, but Hawaii is probably one of the most diverse. Hawaii and New York are probably, you know, in
Yeah.
the US,
Yeah, definitely.
which I like. So what can people that are in the Uyghur movement, like in the Uyghur community do, and what can people that are not in the Uyghur community do to help?
Yeah. So people in the Uyghur community, it's actually very difficult because 99.9% of the people in the Uyghur community, they're in China and they can't speak because of censorship. Like nothing that they want to say about what's happening is going to get out into the world. So that makes it very difficult. Out of the people that are left, a lot of people still have family in those areas. So if they write an article or they make a video, then there's a possibility that their family that's still in China is going to be punished because of that. And there's tons of evidence of people that write these articles and then they get a phone call from their mom or their brother the next week and it's saying that, oh, I've been put in jail for 20 years and it was because of the interview that they gave. So that makes it very dangerous for a lot of people. So I think there are very few people that are like in my position where I'm Uyghur, but I don't have any family that still lives in the area that can be touched by China. So I think for those people, which is a very small part of the population, in the United States there are like 10,000 Uyghur people total. You subtract the amount of people that
10,000 in total?
10,000
Really?
in total. Yeah.
That's so little. Like,
Yeah.
that's-
In the United States, only 10,000.
Wow.
You subtract the amount of people that still have family in East Turkestan that can't speak to it because their family would be threatened. You have even less. There are a lot of people whose English isn't great. There's like first generation immigrants that came from another country. So you have even less people. And then there are people that just like, they're not as in tune with the issue, more like Americanized. So I think after that, you really don't have that many people. So I think out of the people that have the ability to speak, just saying Uyghur as much as possible and telling the story, that's a way that we get other people to understand what's going on. And hearing it from an actual Uyghur is different from just like hearing on CNN or Fox News.
Definitely, man. Because like, if when I hear it on the news, it's just news. But
Yeah.
like when I hear it from you, it's like, oh, like someone I know like went through this suffering, you know, like
Yeah.
at least their relatives, parents, stuff like, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that for the Uyghur community, out of the very few people that are able to, just telling the story, that's very important. And then I think for everyone else, really just amplifying and sharing accounts of Uyghur people and just any kind of news about what's happening to Uyghur people. I think that's the first step, just building international awareness that this is happening so that everyone in America, everyone around the world understands that this is something that's happening to Uyghurs. I think the next steps after that comes in the form of what we talked about before, just pressuring both companies and political leaders to take stronger stances against China, because as individuals, our ability to impact China, like relatively small, but China cares about how Apple is doing their business with them. Mm-hmm. They care about how Tesla is doing business with them, because if they change the way that they do business, they say that we're not going to sell any products that use Uyghur forced labor, then that's going to take a hit out of China's bottom line. Mm-hmm. It's like, then they have to think about, is it worth it for us to be doing this when we're losing so much money? So I think that that's a big way to do it. And then just pressuring political leaders, saying that the United States, we stand for all of these things like freedom of religion, human rights, free speech, and then across the world, there are these people that have none of that. And we always say that we're a champion of these values across the world, but that's very obviously not happening right now. So what can we do in our power to fight against that? A lot of people, they compare it to the Holocaust, because it's really a genocide. Like, they're killing Uyghur people. They're forcing them not to be able to give birth. They're killing the culture, because at the end of the day, they don't want to have any more Uyghurs or Uyghur culture. They want all of China to be Han Chinese. Mm. So this is happening before people's eyes, and a lot of people aren't doing anything about it. And then 10 years, we're going to be like, oh, wow, like all this happened and happened under our nose and we didn't do anything about it.
If you think right now, oh, wow, how did the Holocaust happen? Or, oh, wow, like, if you assume that you would be on the side of civil rights in the 60s or on the side against Hitler in Germany in the 30s, 40s, then I would ask you this then, like, why aren't you supporting Uyghurs right now? Because I think this happened with Muhammad Ali as well, because a lot of people that would have hated his guts at the time that he was like out and about, like at his youth, his prime years, a lot of people would have hated him, and those same people were like saying, oh, I like Muhammad Ali, this, that, mm-hmm. after everything that happened. But I don't think, you know, if they were living in that moment, I don't think they would support Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're not supporting Uyghurs right now, like, I think if this is another Holocaust and you don't care. I mean, you don't care, like, so you probably wouldn't have supported the Jews in the 40s or, you know, whatever.
Yeah. And I think that it's really difficult because you see all these big companies that are siding with China now. So you see that with Disney a lot. They'll change their movies in the United States to what it is in China just to make Chinese government officials happy. You see that in a lot of recent movies, like even with the maps. Like, there's some maps where in the American version they'll show Taiwan as another country, but then in the Chinese version they'll show Taiwan as a territory of China. Yeah. Like, we have to collectively as a country say that we can't let the Chinese government bully us around into what we do as a society and what we care about. Because right now they're dictating what our values are. Like, they're saying, oh, these companies, like, you're going to value Chinese values, like our view of the world, which is putting Uyghurs in these camps, which is like taking the rights away from all these other groups like Hong Kong, Taiwan. But we just have to be strong in our values. This is across all the companies in Hollywood and these big businesses in our politics. We just have to be very strong in our values, because the more that they take away from us, like, it's going to be very difficult to get that back. And it's not just the United States, the Western world, versus China. It's like all these other countries too. Like, how are they going to think about the world? Are they going to see it in the Chinese lens where human rights are being stripped away, or are they going to fall more in the American lens? And I think that's another big advantage that we have, is that most other countries, like, they have good values too. Like, they want to see human rights prosper. So we just have to show them that this is something that's happening, because a lot of them, they're not aware, but once their populations understand this is what's happening to Uyghur people in China, especially the countries with a lot of Muslim people. Like, I think if every person in Indonesia knew this is what was happening in China, like, they wouldn't support Chinese values, because Indonesia is like 99% Muslim. So it's just that people don't know at this point. So once we build that understanding, that's when we're going to be able to make the strongest difference.
How much Uyghur people are there in total in the world?
In the world? So China's where most of them live. There are about 10 million there. The numbers are pretty rough, just because, like, you can't get inside those areas.
And a lot of people say, a lot of people hide their identity, right?
Yeah, exactly. The rest of the Uyghurs, there are a lot that are in Central Asia and Turkey. So those are probably the second biggest populations. So Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkey, probably around all of the Central Asia and Turkey, you have like hundreds of thousands, and then you have smaller groups in the Western world. So I think America is the biggest one with 10,000, and then you have smaller communities in Canada, Australia, United Kingdom, those countries. But around the world, it's very small diaspora, because nowadays, if you're Uyghur and you want to leave China, it's almost impossible. They make it very difficult. It's like, oh, I want to get a passport to leave China. And then they're like, oh, the passport form didn't go through. They make it like bureaucratic. They never say that, oh, you can't leave, because then somebody could take a picture of that and then it would go viral. So they're your form just got rejected because the signature isn't good, or it's expired. So try again in 6 months.
There was a film about African American rights in the U.S. and this guy before the civil rights era, this guy is trying to vote, trying to register to vote, and the government employee asks, "How many candies are in that jar?" And the guy's like, "I don't know," and he's like, "Oh, if you don't know that, I cannot register to vote."
Yeah, no, it's
like something so random.
Yeah,
and then there was this other scene. I don't know if it was a girl, but there was this other scene. The government employee asked him, "How many judges do we have in this state?" And then he's like, "This many." And then he's like, "Okay, name them all." Like, who's gonna name them all? Bro?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, exactly.
It's just like another way of saying, I don't want to give it to you because you're this ethnicity, but it's just like kind of trying to save yourself, protect the government at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
So cynical.
Yeah, China's very good at that. Like, the government, like, smile on your face and say that, oh, nothing bad's happening, but then behind the scenes, they do all these terrible things.
Have you seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, Earth Kingdom?
No, I haven't.
Oh, that's such a good analogy, because in that series, the Earth Kingdom is modeled after China.
Okay.
And if you see some of those scenes, the way that they act, like, they act so nice, like, on the outside, and then the inside, there's like so much like horrible stuff happening all the time.
Yeah.
And it's if you see this, you will know what I mean. Yeah.
I mean, there's a really creepy documentary that I think Vice did, but they went to the camps. But it had to be administered by Chinese officials. So Chinese officials were with them the entire time, and they would go to these camps, and it would be like, oh, how are things in the camp right now? And then you would have one of the prisoners, they're like, oh, I'm so happy right now. Like, they let us do everything that we want. Like, I go to the gym, we like dance every day. And he's like smiling the entire time. And it's so creepy. And then I think at one point they were asking like, oh, can we just get like a one-on-one with him? And then the official was like, no. And like the entire time the prisoner, he just had like a very forced smile. And it's like so creepy, because it's obvious that they told him beforehand, like, we're going to beat or kill you if you say that you're not having a good time. So lie to these reporters and say that all these great things are happening.
Yeah. A lot of those videos, I see them on social media. Everyone makes fun of them for being fake. And there are also these videos that the government releases. I think
Yeah.
they look even more fake.
Yeah, there's an article from the New York Times, and there's a whole like social media trend of Uyghur people in China that say that, oh, I'm loving it in China right now. I have so many rights. And then they looked into the videos. They all use the same language. So they're all saying, it's like they're reading from a script. They're all saying the exact same thing. All of the videos came out at pretty much the same time. And it's just like super easy to spot publicity attempt by the Chinese government to say that, oh, this isn't an issue. You shouldn't pay attention to it. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's very advanced level genocide. It's not like, oh, they're putting them in a chamber and shooting them in the head. It's like they use a ton of technology to censor Uyghur people, to make sure that they put their own narrative into the world. Then at the same time, a ton of surveillance so that any information coming in and out is being controlled by China. And they use a lot of advanced technologies like genetic blueprinting, facial recognition to identify Uyghur people and to sentence them to the camps. So yeah, it's a very difficult topic just because they're so technologically advanced.
Yeah. Yeah, you had a question for me about remakes in film.
Oh yeah. So we were talking about films and how nowadays, at least in my perspective, like I feel like a lot of films are not original. So all the films that are coming out are like Marvel universe, Disney universe, a sequel or a remake. So I was wondering, like, why isn't there as much original content that's coming out?
Yeah. So the people that are working in Hollywood, a lot of these people are insecure. They just want to keep their jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you're an executive at a studio. If you know that you can make 20% profit on a Disney remake, live action remake, then you would probably take that deal, because if you do a 50% profit on something else, you're not going to make more money, probably, right? Because it's the studio making the top dollar. And another thing is, like, if you try something new and it fails, you could get fired. Like, everyone's just trying to keep their jobs, like everyone's just trying to feed their family, and that makes them try to do more secure, always try to do more secure stuff. And those remakes are seen as like, there's a profit, but it's low and it's less risk, because people think live action remake of this, and people already know, let's say, that movie, and they see there's a remake, and so they just go to that in the theaters. Like, it gets butts and seats. That's what it's called. And that's what, at the end of the day, box office revenue, it's a business. Like, a lot of people do it for the art, but also a lot of people do it just as a business. Like, a lot of those executives, producers, they're not that passionate about wanting to create something original or wanting to create something great. They're more thinking about, like, how can I make 10% off this, 20% off this? And the standard for them to make is basically, the way it goes in a lot of places is, the original person who comes up with the idea, the original producer, pays everyone who invests in the film 20% profit, their money back plus 20%, and then whatever gets left, they get whatever that gets left.
Okay.
So if you want to convince someone that they're gonna get 20% profit, it's easier to tell them we're doing a live action remake or the 15th edition of Spider-Man 2, because it's something that they can understand and that they're familiar with.
Yeah, you don't have to pitch a new idea.
Yes, but if you come up with something original, even if it's a great idea, it could be harder to get financing for that idea.
I feel like you could do a hybrid though, because you could do the remakes, but then like you're making a ton of money off that. So for every remake, you can make an original idea that you're passionate about, and if that fails, you still have enough money that you made from the remakes.
I think that's the best way to do it, which is to do a remake and do it in an original way. I think Cobra Kai does this very well. Have you seen Cobra Kai?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've never seen any episodes.
The original was in the 80s or something, And
Yeah, I've seen the original Karate Kids.
yeah. So the remake is basically them as adults, and they have like karate students, and they have like families, and they have like this one guy has a business, and it's like the rivalry kind of continues, but they add more characters, and it doesn't feel boring. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like another Karate Kid movie. I think the first remake in 2011 or 12 with Chris's son.
Yeah, Jaden Smith.
Jaden Smith, yeah, with him. The first remake was also really good because they changed the concept. Like he now lives in the Karate Kid lives in China,
Yeah.
and the main actor that's the sensei, the master is Jackie Chan. They just kind of reinvented the idea, and it wasn't like the same thing but with different actors. I feel like that one was the least you could do if you're doing a remake. But Cobra Kai was very successful. I would suggest people look at Cobra Kai as an example of how to invent and still do a remake. But a lot of those people, like, they don't want to lose money because let's say you have a net worth of $100 million, right? If you make, let's say, $100 million more, nothing changes in your life, right? Like in terms of what you drive, where you live, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't change anything. But if you lose 100 million,
Yeah, it's a pretty big difference.
pretty big difference,
Yeah.
right? So that's how a lot of those rich guys think. They just want to keep what they have. They're not trying to reach for more in an aggressive way.
Yeah.
They're just trying to make 10%, 20%. And that's what I think, even though he has his flaws and stuff, I admire that about Elon Musk. Even though he's super rich, he has net worth of like 200 billion, he's still like taking huge risks.
Yeah, he does very different things.
Like he's taking huge $1 billion risks, and I don't think it's easy as it looks to be in his position and take that much risk.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think I disagree with him on a lot of like personal issues and stuff, but I think overall, like, he's the only one that's taking massive risks. Like him buying Twitter, him trying to go to Mars. Like he's the only one that's like trying to do like innovative. Like most people, when they become a billionaire, they just like go to the beach and they just like relax for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
But I feel like he's actually trying to build new stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I think at least from his perspective, he's trying to change the world for the better.
Yeah.
So I definitely admire that about him. But yeah, going back to movies, I think that all my favorite movies in the last few years have been kind of like the experimental, like very different concept type stuff. So I liked Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. That one was a really cool one.
Have you seen 1917?
No, I wanted to see that one. That's a Christopher Nolan, right?
No.
Oh, no. It's also like war.
It's German filmmakers. I don't know who's the person, but I think it's German filmmakers. World War I, reimagined. I mean, like, it's a remake too, which I didn't know it was a remake when I watched it. It's based on a novel, and there's been other movies about the same topic in the past. But it was such a good movie. I was rooting to win over Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Okay.
But the editing in Everything Everywhere All at Once is really unique. Like it's innovative, and yeah, it won the Oscars. You might know that.
Yeah. I think the story too was just like very, very well told.
Yeah, and the editor
love that one.
shared a screenshot of his timeline, and they edited that in Adobe Premiere Pro, and it looks so messy. But I love it because it shows all these editors that are like that think, oh, in order to be a good editor, I have to be like super organized. It shows all these people that like it's fine, like it happens even at the top level, so it makes everyone less anxious about what they're doing.
Yeah.
I think even if it's messy, like as long as an editor, if you put in the work, you try your best, I think you could still make something great.
I think for movies, like as long as you're like strong enough to have a strong like bold enough to have a strong message, like I don't care if it's a remake, because the Spider-Verse movies, it's still like technically in the Spider-Man universe. And even though Across the Spider-Verse was a sequel, I still think that was the best movie from this year. Because like I feel like they have a strong message. It's like obviously the visuals are cool. I love the soundtrack, but they're not afraid to have a strong message versus other movies. I feel like a lot of the Marvel movies, it's like it's just like they try and make it too funny and they try and make it like lighthearted. It's like a fun movie to watch for sure, but it's not like I feel like I've changed after the movie. I feel like the same thing with the Dark Knight trilogy. That was very good in having a strong message. So they weren't afraid, even though it was a superhero movie, to have a message in there. But I feel like nowadays, like people are scared to put a message in a lot of movies. You just want to like play it safe.
Yeah, that's unfortunately a lot of the industry, but I want to be on the more daring, more creative side because I'd rather fail at trying to do something great than be successful at trying to do something that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I like this quote from Kobe Bryant. He says, "I'm trying to be perfect. And I know I'll never get there, but just the fact that I'm trying to be perfect makes me better than most people, like most other players."
Yeah.
Which I like that mentality a lot. Like him, I'm trying something that's really hard, which is to make it in the film industry, to make it in YouTube. But I'm trying to be perfect, and just the fact that I'm trying, you know?
That's better than people that don't have a defined goal.
Yeah,
they're just like floating around.
Yeah, that's better than people that are not trying, and that's the majority that are not trying.
Yeah, and then if you have any questions about either going to an Ivy League school or prestigious school or about Uyghur advocacy, I invite people to reach out to me. In my family, no one else has ever went to an Ivy League school before me. So I had a ton of questions and I didn't have anyone to reach out to. So I would just look on the internet. It was like Google was my mentor.
That's great, man.
Yeah, now that I have gone through the process, like I want to help out people. So if anyone wants to apply to some like Ivy League school or prestigious school, like please feel free to reach out. Like it's not weird or anything, and I'll help out everyone that reaches out to me. Because I didn't have that resource when I was going through the process. So like anyone that wants that help, I definitely want to help out.
Yeah, I kind of think sometimes I'm trying to make videos that I wish I could watch when I was younger.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that a lot.
I think especially coming from an immigrant background, like a lot of the other students at Yale, like their parents went to Yale, like their great grandparents went to Yale.
Legacy.
So they're like, so they're like asking their parents like, oh, what do I write for my resume and my college essays, and what should I do for when I'm in school? And a lot of immigrant families, they don't have that. So I think like within our community, it's always good to share the knowledge.
That's great. Thanks so much. So how can people reach you?
So mainly the big ones are my personal social media, so Muhammad Mahmudov, and then our Free Uyghur Now social media. So Free Uyghur Now, those are on Instagram. That's where we're most active, but we're trying to expand to the other social media outlets as well.
We send out prayers to the Uyghur community in China who are experiencing hardships, to the victims of the wildfires in Mali, and to all the people in Palestine and Israel, the civilians that have been victims of these massacres, of these violent events. Inshallah, everything will be better. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So do you have any other questions for me?
I think that's it for the most part. That was a really cool conversation.
Yeah, thank you.